From Studio 19, I'm Jeff Allen Wolf. This is A World Gone Mad, episode 241. Okay, there's always so much to talk about, but I obviously can't share everything with you because it would take over 3 hours or more. Here we go. Iran and America reach a deal. What the U.S. says versus what Tehran says. Both countries have issued contradictory statements on key aspects of the framework, which is set for signing a ceremony in Geneva on Friday. So there's a deal, or at least an agreement for both sides to keep talking, but few details, if any. The United States and Iran announced they've reached a framework agreement that would extend the ceasefire, reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and continue talks over Iran's nuclear program. That's the official announcement. Here's the part I'm struggling with. The two countries involved immediately started describing different agreements. I'm serious. That's where we are. A deal has supposedly been reached, and before anybody can start celebrating, the people who negotiated it are already offering competing explanations of what they negotiated. That's not usually considered a confidence builder. Now, if two people announce they're engaged and one says they're planning a wedding while the other says they're just casually dating, most of us would conclude that there's a communication problem. Yet somehow this is being presented as a breakthrough. Maybe it is. Maybe we've entered a bold new era of diplomacy where the details are optional. Maybe the actual agreement is hidden inside a diplomatic escape room, and everyone gets clues after the signing ceremony. Maybe Friday's event in Geneva isn't a signing at all. Maybe it's a fact-finding mission where both sides gather around a table and finally compare notes to see what they think they agreed to. What exactly am I supposed to be excited about here? The ceasefire? Great. The Strait of Hormuz reopening? Great. Reduced tensions? Fantastic. I'd support all of those things. But before I start celebrating, I'd like to know whether there's one agreement or two. At the moment, it feels like we're being handed two instruction manuals and told they're for the same machine. The part that really gets me is how quickly everyone rushes to declare victory with Iran. Victory over what? Clarity? We don't even have clarity yet. We've got dueling descriptions. We've got competing narratives. We've got two governments looking at what is supposedly the same agreement and telling two different stories about it. That's not the end of the confusion. That's the beginning of the confusion. Maybe this works out. Maybe by next week, everybody is on the same page. I hope so. But if the opening act of a historic diplomatic agreement is both sides publicly disagreeing about the agreement, then forgive me for being a little skeptical when people start talking about stability, certainty, and lasting peace. Excuse me. Right now, the most solid part of this deal appears to be the agreement that there was an agreement. Everything after that is up for negotiation. Gavin Newsom says Trump Justice Department is investigating him and his wife. Gavin Newsom says federal agents have been knocking on doors of family members and former employees looking for information about him and his wife. According to Newsom, they're not investigating a crime. They're looking for one. And if that's true, then apparently we've entered a fascinating new chapter in American law enforcement where you pick the target first and worry about the evidence later. The process is supposed to be pretty simple. You find evidence of wrongdoing, you investigate, you gather facts, you identify suspects. What you don't do is start with a suspect, then send people out looking for something, anything that might justify the investigation afterward. That's not law enforcement. That's reverse engineering, everyone. So the new standard is we pick the target first, go after and go looking for the crime later. Imagine a police officer pulling you over and saying, we don't know what you did yet, but we're pretty confident we'll come up with something. Nobody would tolerate that. Nobody would defend it. Nobody would say that's how a justice system is supposed to operate. Yet somehow, when politics gets involved, people suddenly become incredibly flexible about principles they would have been screaming about 5 years ago. And the reason this story's so ridiculous is because we're talking about Donald Trump. This is the same Donald Trump who spent years telling us the government was being weaponized against political opponents. Remember that? Of course you do. We heard it every day. The system was rigged. The investigators were biased. Prosecutors were out to get Trump. The government couldn't be trusted. It was one of the central arguments of Trump's entire political career. Now a governor who may run for president says federal agents are knocking on doors looking for dirt, and suddenly we're supposed to believe that's completely different. Apparently, weaponizing government power is a terrible abuse of authority right up until the moment your side gets control of the government. Then it magically transforms into responsible leadership. That's what always amazes me about politics. The principles aren't supposed to change depending on whose team is winning. If it's wrong to use government power to target political opponents when it happens to your side, then it's wrong when your side does it too. The standard can't be, it's outrageous when they do it, and perfectly acceptable when we do it. Seriously? That's not a justice system. That's fan fiction. Governor Newsom responded by saying Trump picked the wrong target. Newsom isn't backing down. Newsom isn't shutting up. And he clearly isn't intimidated by an insecure old man who expects everybody around him to fall in line the moment he starts throwing his weight around. Newsom is not putting up with that garbage. The truly crazy part is how normal this is starting to sound. A governor says the federal government is looking for a crime instead of investigating one, and half the country barely shrugs. That's the part that should bother everyone. Not Gavin Newsom, not Donald Trump. The fact that behavior would have set off alarm bells across the political spectrum a generation ago, and it's now being treated like just another Tuesday in American politics. That's a world gone mad. Trump says the 4th of July celebration on the National Mall will include his own rally. Think about this. Donald Trump announced that the July 4th celebration on the National Mall, which is supposed to commemorate America's 250th birthday, will also be a Trump rally. Not metaphorically, not the media calling that. Trump literally called it the most spectacular Trump rally of them all. A tribute to America. Trump said it would feature military bands, fireworks, and even his playlist. And honestly, at this point, why not? We've already had his sneakers. We've already had the trading cards. We've had his Bibles. We've had his perfume. We've had his coins. We've had his watches. We've had the endless campaign rallies. The only thing left was apparently to take the country's birthday and slap Donald's name on that also. Wolfpack listeners, think about how bizarre this is. Most presidents show up to Independence Day celebrations because they are president. Donald Trump is turning the Independence Day celebration into a celebration of Donald Trump Because he's Donald Trump. America's 250th birthday should be the easiest assignment in politics. Stand there, salute the flag, talk about the country, thank the military, talk about the historical 250th birthday of America, watch the fireworks, go home. Easy friggin' peasy. Somehow we've arrived at a place where even that has become a personality cult production, featuring Trump's playlist, Trump's rally, Trump's branding, and presumably Trump's belief that nobody in American history has ever loved America quite as much as Donald Trump. And that's always the tell. Everything eventually becomes about Trump. Every event, every issue, every controversy, every accomplishment, every microphone, every camera, every spotlight. It's like gravity. No matter where the story starts, eventually gets pulled into the same black hole. And the funniest part, listeners, and I say that sarcastically, is that this is the 250th birthday of the United States. 250 years of presidents, soldiers, inventors, activists, immigrants, workers, scientists, and ordinary Americans who built this country. Yet somehow the headline becomes, Donald Trump says America's birthday will also be a Trump rally. Of course it will. Because if there's one thing Donald Trump has never been able to resist, it's the opportunity to turn a national event into a mirror and spend the evening admiring the reflection. And finally, Fox is buying Roku for about $22 billion. That's the news. Fox says it wants to combine its content with Roku's platform, expand its advertising reach, and create a bigger streaming powerhouse by combining Roku's ecosystem with Tubi and Fox's existing media properties. Now, maybe I'm just cynical, but I always love these merger announcements. They're always presented like a humanitarian mission. A giant corporation spends $22 billion, and we're told it's all being done for our benefit. They're helping us. They're serving us. They're enhancing our experience in life. It's amazing how every multi-billion-dollar acquisition somehow ends with executives sounding like volunteers at a food bank. Let's be honest about what Fox just bought, okay? They didn't buy a Roku streaming stick. They bought a front door. They bought the screen millions of people stare at before they decide what to watch. That's like buying a shopping mall and then assuring everybody you have absolutely no interest in which stores people walk into. Sure, of course. And maybe nothing changes. Maybe Fox becomes the first giant media company in history to spend $22 billion and then politely sits over in the corner while everybody else's content gets exactly the same visibility, same promotion, and same attention. That's possible. It's also possible my cat is secretly doing my taxes. Because influence doesn't require conspiracy. It doesn't require secret meetings. It doesn't require somebody wearing a black cape in a dark room. It just requires nudges, a recommendation here, a promotion there, a featured placement, a highlighted banner, a home screen suggestion. Before long, people start seeing on Roku the same things over and over and wondering why everybody's suddenly talking about the same topics. That's the real power now. Not controlling speech, controlling attention. If I could decide what gets put in front of your face first, I've already got a huge advantage before you've clicked a single button. And that's why this Fox Roku deal matters. We're living in a country already drowning in political messaging, outrage, algorithms, influencers, corporate spin, partisan media, and carefully crafted narratives. Now you're talking about Fox, right? one of the largest media companies in America, Fox, wants more control over the pipeline that delivers information and entertainment into millions of homes. Maybe it'll be harmless. Maybe it'll be great. But when a company spends $22 billion buying a bigger megaphone, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask whether they're planning to use that microphone. Because history suggests corporations don't spend that kind of money for the exercise. They spend it because they expect more power, more influence, more control, and eventually more profit. The only mystery is what Fox plans to do with the $22 billion worth of influence it just bought. That's today's insight into a world gone mad. If you've enjoyed the podcast, found it informative, maybe got a laugh or two along the way, then please contribute to keeping this podcast around. I'm not backed by corporate media, everyone. There's no outside money pushing the show, building the show, promoting the show, other than my own wallet. So if you could please contribute to the GoFundMe, even a small donation makes a difference. The link is in the description below this episode. I'm Jeff Allen Wolf. This is A World Gone Mad. I'll be back Wednesday. Until then, I urge you, the wolf pack, remain skeptical. Question everything. Please, don't lose hope. And most of all, stay alert.